The NTSB on the scene investigating the deadly Amtrak train accident. New revelations of the speed of the train as it derailed, leaving 7 dead as of this moment and 8 still in critical condition. Authorities fear more dead passengers could be found as well. Hello, I'm Ty Hernandez in New York. ABC's Karen Travers is in Philadelphia and can fill us in on the very latest. Hello, Karen.
Good afternoon, Ty. Speed appears to be a factor. Just moments ago, the NTSB said that Amtrak train 188 was traveling faster than 100 miles per hour last night, just before it derailed. Passengers last night described a scene of chaos, and today the tracks at the crash scene are mangled, power lines are down. Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter said it is incredible to him that so many people, about 200, were able to walk away.
At least 7 dead, dozens injured, and so many questions. Investigators have been at the Amtrak crash scene in Northeast Philadelphia all day, sifting through mangled metal and debris.
Our purpose for being here on site is to collect the perishable evidence, the information that will go away with the passage of time. What was the train speed? What was the speed limit on that curve? That's part of our investigation.
The NTSB said preliminary data shows the train was traveling faster than 100 miles per hour before it derailed. Officials recovered the train's equivalent of a black box, and it's being analyzed by Amtrak officials for clues. ABC News has learned the engineer received treatment for an injury and was interviewed today by local and federal officials. The tragic accident happened just before 9:30 p.m. last night, minutes after Amtrak train 188 left Philadelphia's 30th Street station. It was en route from Washington, D.C. to New York, traveling on the busiest train line in the country.
I heard it like a big bang.
All 7 cars, plus the engine, broke off the track.
The train tilted over and rolled.
Amtrak says there were 238 passengers and 5 crew members on board. Among the fatalities, 20-year-old Justin Zemser, a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, and 48-year-old Jim Gaines, who worked for the Associated Press. More than 200 passengers were treated at local hospitals.
It is incredible that so many people walked away from that scene last night. And I don't know how that happened, but for the grace of God.
Ty, there are still people who are unaccounted for, and Philadelphia's mayor said that they haven't been able to completely match the passenger manifest given to them by Amtrak with the information they have from local hospitals. That may mean that some of the passengers who were ticketed just didn't get on the train last night or haven't checked in yet with authorities. Ty?
And Karen, how has this accident affected Amtrak service today?
The severe disruptions, Ty. You cannot travel from Philadelphia to New York City right now on Amtrak. That part of the stretch of rail is completely shut down as investigators are on the scene. There was limited service today between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, but of course there were many cancellations and some travel delays and disruptions. This is the busiest stretch of Amtrak in the entire country. On any given day between Washington and Boston, 2,200 trains are passing. Officials say this is going to be a very thorough investigation, and judging by how the crash scene looks today, Ty, it may be a while before travel is back up to normal.
Thank you, Karen, for that information. ABC's Karen Travers joining us from Philadelphia. And with us from Chicago, the president of the National Safety Council and former chairman of the NTSB, Deborah Hirstman. Hello, Deborah. The NTSB confirming today the train was traveling over 100 miles per hour on a curve that had a limit of 50 miles per hour. So how could something like this happen?
You know, unfortunately, we've seen this all too often. When we look at the speeds that trains are traveling, you really have limitations based on the track, the class of the track, and particularly things like curves and any work that's being done that's got to keep those speeds at a certain level. Just like we do on a highway, you've got speed limits and they have to be complied with for safety reasons.
While we are speaking, the NTSB is examining that train's black box. What else will investigators be looking at in that box? We know the speed was in excess of what it should have been. What else is key information here?
You know, they're going to be looking at key inputs that would be made by the locomotive engineer or any telltale signs that there were problems. They'll be looking to determine what the throttle position was, whether it was, you know, accelerating, decelerating, if they were braking, if it was an emergency braking operation or a normal braking operation, or if even the brakes were applied at all. Those black boxes can tell them a lot of information about how the train was handled up until the derailment.
Now, we know the train's engineer is being questioned by the NTSB. Does he have to fully cooperate, or can he refuse for fear of self-incrimination?
You know, he certainly has that right to refuse to answer any questions, but an NTSB investigation is not a criminal investigation. It really is a safety investigation to try to find out what happened to prevent something from happening in the future. They learn from tragedies like this to make sure that other railroads, not just Amtrak, have an opportunity to understand what happened and either change policies, procedures, or technology.
This derailment has spawned a greater conversation about our nation's rail infrastructure. New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez had this to say earlier.
You know, I travel Amtrak, as I said, virtually every week. I travel the Acela, which is supposed to be our high-speed rail. It's like shake, rattle, and roll. As a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I've traveled in other countries in the world, like Japan. And they have a bullet train for which you virtually cannot feel anything while you're on the train, going in speeds far in excess of what we call high-speed rail.
Is this country's rail system considered antiquated, and how does that affect passenger safety?
You know, I would say it's very interesting when it comes to our rail system in this country. Our freight rail system is one of the best in the world. In the world, it's privately funded. These companies invest in their own track, they maintain it, and they move a great deal of goods across the nation. But our passenger rail system absolutely has a different level of investment, and compared to other industrialized nations in Europe and Japan, the U.S. has not invested in passenger rail as a great intermodal option.
What can the government do to make sure either accidents like this don't happen again or passengers are more safe? Is there a call, for example, for seatbelts on trains? We hear about all these rib injuries and worse in this accident. Is that something people are calling for?
You know, they often look at survival factors with respect to a crash, and certainly restraints like seatbelts could be something to consider. But I think you've got to look at the whole environment when it comes to a train. It's a very different environment. You don't have the luggage and coffee pots and other things restrained. You've got to restrain more than just the passengers if you're looking for protecting that passenger compartment. But at the end of the day, you want to prevent the event from occurring in the first place, whether it's a derailment or a collision. And Congress has called on the railroads to implement positive train control by the end of 2015. Positive train control can prevent overspeed accidents like this one.
Well, we have very little time left to make any significant progress in that department, but hopefully we are on our way. Deborah Hersman, thank you so much for joining us. And you can keep up with this story in real time by downloading the ABC News app and starring this story for exclusive updates on the go. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York.